Elliott, are you ready? Are the recorders running? Let's start the show. Welcome to Not Your Mother presents this episode of Fly on the Wall Radio. We have a very special guest, Wally Waller. In the early 1960s, Wally Waller played the rhythm guitar in Bern Elliott and the Fenmen, a five-piece beat and rhythm and blues band. In 1967, Wally joined Pretty Things as a bass player, replacing John Stax. At the same time, Jon Povey, the Fenmen's drummer, became the Pretty Things keyboardist. Waller was a childhood friend of lead singer Fenmen, and they started writing songs together for the Things' third studio album, Emotions, released in 1967. Their musical partnership continued on the next two albums, the rock opera SF Sorrow and its follow-up Parachute, the latter being entirely written by May and Waller. So let's get started. Remember that this radio show is listener-funded. If you wish to contribute, our PayPal info is notyourmothersradio@gmail.com. That's notyourmothersradio@gmail.com. We would like to thank you in advance. We really need the help.
You sent me the Sun, and
I also sent you the Good Mr. Square too.
Yeah, the Sun was on the Emotions album, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
That was the first song. That song actually changed the Pretty Things history, because Phil asked me. He was struggling with his third studio album, Emotions, with the material. I was still working with another band called the Fenmen, and he invited. But we lived opposite each other in the same street. I went off kind of to be electrical engineer. That didn't work out. So and then Phil went to art school, so we gone our separate ways. I got into another band, and Phil started the Pretty Things. But when he said, "Why don't you come over and see if we can write some music this afternoon?" We were both home at the same time, and he said, so we wrote The Sun and a couple of others we had, and he said, "Why don't you? Do you want to join the band? Do you want to join the Pretty Things?" So I said yes, and that was it. Things changed.
Rest is history, as they say. Okay, so I'd like to introduce everybody to Wally Waller. Wally, you will remember the Pretty Things, and you recorded on their two most famous records, FS Sorrow and Parachute.
Yeah, I had quite a lot to do with both of them, and it was a weird time. There was, I guess, Phil was feeling the art school R&B, which is kind of where the Pretty Things had started from, was kind of wearing a bit thin, and there was something else going on. It was, psychedelia and stuff, and it was an empty slate. You could do what you want, and so we did.
So you, prior to the Pretty Things, you worked in the Fenmen. You were in the band the Fenmen,
right?
And that you had a top 20 hit with you did Money. You'd cover the Money.
The Barrett Strong song from Motown.
Yeah. Right, and that was the end of '63, which was pretty much the whole beginning of that British invasion thing starting to boil, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then so Bern Elliott left the band, and you guys carried on as the Fenmen for a bit.
Yeah.
And actually, you carried on for a good number of years, 3-4 years.
Well, we did. Bern Elliott was he was going to be a big star,
Yeah, that didn't. Yeah, okay.
I don't think Frank Sinatra and Elvis lost too much sleep, but he disappeared. But we carried on. We always had a lot of kind of vocal harmony going on behind, and we just made that our feature. We did a lot of harmony stuff. And that's when John came with me into the Pretty Things at the same time.
Yeah.
And we brought that with us because we had a big history of
right.
singing in harmony. And Phil had no history at all, but he was an eager learner. So the three of us started making some quite good vocal stuff.
I noticed that a lot about those bands back in the 60s. A lot of guys just hopped into a band to be in a band and learn their instruments secondary, right?
Oh, yeah.
That was pretty funny, and a lot of these guys became really, really proficient and kind of became trendsetters. So it kind of worked out well. But you were you were a guitarist, and I know you guys the first you did that tune "Rejected" for the Fenmen. You wrote that song.
Yeah.
And that was like pretty much the end. After that, you were asked to join the Pretty Things, and you came on as a bass player.
Yeah, well, when John and I both joined together, John was the drummer in the Fenmen,
right?
And I was a guitar player, as you say. I joined as a bass player in the Pretty Things. I hadn't played bass before, and John. And the drummer, there was already a drummer in the Pretty Things. So John joined as a keyboard player. He spent some time studying keyboards as at school and stuff. So
and that's Jon Povey.
That's Jon Povey, yeah.
Yeah. So you're in the Pretty Things, and you and Phil May were old buddies. You guys were. We
grew up since the age of 4. We lived opposite each other in the same street.
Yeah.
I mean, we were, there were no other kids of our age, so we were inseparable. We did everything together for.
Yeah. I actually saw pictures of you guys at a beach in bathing suits and everything. Really, really young stuff. I don't know how it wound up on Facebook. It must have been on your site. But yeah. So you guys did. You knew each other for a long time. You replaced John Stax in the Pretty Things. You were his replacement, right. And so you came on, and you and Phil started working together, and you started writing together, and you guys did some incredible work. We'll get to some of the stuff in a bit, but you started out on the Emotions album. Is that the first album you did?
Yeah, I think the Emotions was underway, but I think Phil was struggling badly with finding material, and he wasn't getting a lot of help from the rest. I mean, and I think he was very disappointed with some members. And I guess that prompted him at the end of our first attempt at writing. He said, "Do you want to join the band?" I said yes. So that was big. That song was "The Sun," and I think that's what that changed. It changed the shape of Pretty Things history.
Okay, now I have two versions of "The Sun" here. I have the actual cut from Emotions, and I have a great acoustic just piece that you sent, and they're both. It's the same tune, and they're both done pretty much the same way. Only one's heavy duty electric, and the other one is you basically just doing it all. So right. I'd like to play that one. Which one do you suggest we put in? I could play them both. I could play one later on, but which one do you want to listen to now? Do you want to listen to?
Well, I don't know. I think the original cut from album from Emotions is one of. I think for me that was the best track on Emotions. And when we wrote it, I had my doubts because it didn't sound anything like a Pretty Thing song to me. But I don't know how we got to that. But we did.
Well, okay, so we'll take a quick break. I'm going to play the Sun, and this is the Pretty Things. This is from the LP Emotions, and we're going to get to the other piece later. So let's get this going, and we'll.
The sun will cross the sky, cross the sky. You reach out, but it's too high, it's too high. Will you settle? Will you settle? Will you settle? Will you settle? Will you settle for that water touched by land? Water touched by land. When the sun has passed you by, passed you by in the darkness, you will cry, you will cry, and your tears, and your tears, and your tears, and your tears, and your tears will be soaked up by the sand, soaked up by the sand. It's been my fault, yes, mine from the start. If I told you never fallen so hard, so hard. Yes, it's been my fault. The sun has passed you by, passed you by in the darkness. You will cry, and your tears, 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 and your tears will be soaked up by the sand, soaked up by the sand, touching all the land, soaked up by the sand.
Okay, that was The Sun with the Pretty Things from the Emotions album. And we have Wally Waller here with us. And Wally, you co-wrote this song with Phil May.
Yes.
And right after this tune, you were asked to join the band as a full-time member.
Yeah, I was working in another band called the Fenmen, and Phil had a strong history going back, since we were 4 years old, as I say. But we discovered that, that afternoon we discovered we had we had a musical rapport when we could write songs together. And he liked my what I was doing. Phil, mostly I wrote most of the music and Phil wrote most of the lyrics, and that's how it worked. Through our history, that's the way it worked, but not uniquely like that. There was no rules.
Right. Okay, and Phil passed away a few years ago, and what type of guy was he? He was the face of the Pretty Things. Everybody knew Phil. He was there for 90% of the time. He was the member that was the Pretty Things. Was he?
Yeah.
Was he? Obviously, you guys were friends, but how did you, and you worked well together? But how was he as a bandmate? Everything was pretty cool with him, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. when you're in a band and you're doing a lot of stuff, we were quite busy touring, recording, broadcasts and stuff. So you can't live like a perfect life. There's gonna be moments of friction.
It's kind of like being married.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I know. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And, it has its ups and downs. I know, peaks and valleys. But I mean, the Pretty Things were a pretty influential band. They kind of influenced a lot of people out there, and they had a pretty interesting beginning. Anybody out there listening, check out the Pretty Things history, and it goes back to the Rolling Stones and pre-Rolling Stones.
Yeah,
a lot of those guys,
Dick Taylor. He was part of the original Rolling Stones when they were called Little Boy Blue and the
Little Boy
whatever.
Blue. Yep. And they were pretty much the same type of band as the Rolling Stones. They played a lot of R&B stuff, a lot of rhythm and blues, a lot of like Motown influenced stuff. And excuse me. Then when you popped up, they got into a little more psychedelic type feeling to their music.
I think there was something in the air going on at that time. Phil cut his musical teeth in the art school with this kind of unique R&B kind of thing. But I've been working the kind of R&B that I've been that affected me a lot in the few years before that, when I was in the Fenmen, was stuff like the Coasters and the Motown stuff, not so much this pure, very narrow kind of R&B that we associate with the art school stuff, where like the Stones and the Yardbirds and blah blah blah. So I was coming from a different angle. So, but I think we met in a good place where we found that we could write together, and we both enjoyed the direction that we were moving in. I mean, I mean, you can only write what you write. I mean, there was no kind of ordained direction that we were right. We're going to do this, but we sit down with our instruments, and out would come this. And it wasn't because we wanted it to go that way, but you just write what you write.
Yeah, that's how it came out. Okay, and so obviously you guys did a lot of collaborating as the Pretty Things, and SF Sorrow, which is the go-to album for most Pretty Thing fans, was pretty much a concept album, and it predated the Who as being the first rock opera, and you guys never really got that credit that the Pretty Things deserve for that, because you guys did the first rock opera, and it was SF Sorrow. And tell us about that. That was a classic. That album is just an incredible album.
Well, the idea of doing that. I mean, people used to make LPs, and they'd be like 12 A sides and 12 B, 6 A sides, and they'd put them on a disc. But I thought it'd be so much nicer if the songs were related. There was some kind of consequence and sequence going on, like some kind of narrative going through. I didn't think the words rock opera never occurred to me. But anyway, I said to Phil, "No, why don't we get a story and illustrate it with music, and that can be the album." He said, he's a great ummer and ahrer, and he ummed and ahed a lot. I remember we were touring Denmark at the time, and he didn't give me any kind of real positive vibes about it. But before too long, he'd taken up the idea, and he said, "Well, I've got this short story I've been writing called I don't know, some Corporal Sorrow or something that I don't know. I can't remember exactly." But he said, let's see what It kind of grew. It was organic. We started mostly Phil's story, but the story line it's like cross pollination between story and songs, and so they would both affect each other, and so it was organic. It wasn't we didn't sit down and write, this is a story, right, let's write some songs. It grew. It kind of, it did, it was part of an organic thing. And that's how we finally we finally finished. We were on it. We did an odd, really strange movie, a Norman Wisdom movie, and we had a lot of spare time. We were every morning at 8 o'clock. We were made up, and then just in case they needed to use us. And we spent a lot of time just hanging around. And during that time, we finished. We were about halfway through SSR at that stage, and in all our downtime, when we had lots and lots of it, on the location where we were working up in northwest England, a place called Southport, and so we finished writing the album, and finally, when we finished filming our scenes on that, we went back down, booked the time in Abbey Road, and finished it off. And that's that we were. I remember when we were, we had a record player in our dressing room stuff, and I remember we had things like Simon and Garfunkel, the Bridge Over Troubled Water. We were playing a lot, and Buffalo Springfield. I remember this, quite a lot of stuff that was, that kind of, we were playing a lot anyway. I don't know if that affected, if we got any influences. I guess we must have done subliminally from things like that. But because we were all together playing music.
Now, if I was going to play a pretty SF Sorrow tune, what is one of your one of the tunes that you like the best on that album that I could play?
I think Balloon Burning was something I enjoyed. I had a lot to do with the construction of that, and the instrumentation. And it was unusual. It was particularly pleasing to the end result. In those days, we were still working on 4-track machines, so it was a big.
Okay, well let's take a quick break. I'm going to play Balloon Burning, and we'll be back in just a bit. Wally Waller from some great solo stuff, some great Pretty Things music, and we're going to get into talking about some other stuff. And guys, I just want to remind everybody, if you're listening to this, then you know, but we can be found on all the major podcast sites. We're on Apple, we're on Spreaker, we're also on Spotify. Wherever you find your podcasts, you can find Not Your Mother's Radio podcasts, and Fly on the Wall podcast, and also Destroy All Rational Thoughts. So we're easy to find. And we're going back to Wally now. So Wally, you wound up working at the biggest studio on the planet, the most famous, studio, and I think everybody knows EMI, which is Abbey Road, and you were an engineer at Abbey Road for a number of years.
A producer. I wasn't an engineer, but I was. I worked for. I had an office in central London in Manchester Square, but I used to. But all my work was done in Abbey Road, up in St John's Wood, which is it's just a few miles away. But no, it was great. I produced a lot of work. I worked at Abbey Road, as an artist, perhaps, but with the Pretty Things, made all their records there, and then.
Elliot's not your mother. He's not mine either. I wouldn't mind it though.
At Abbey Road a lot. So I mean, it's beautiful. It's a cathedral of sound.
Yes.
You can't. I mean, it has there's something magic about those walls. When you walk into Studio 2, which is usually known as the Beatles studio, that you come down the stairs from the control room, and the place just feels like it's magic. You know, those hallowed walls have witnessed so much.
What history came out? Yeah, the history in that place was incredible. So you worked with Norman Smith. You and Norman were pretty tight, and Norman was the Beatles engineer.
Yeah, he engineered all the Beatles right from the very, very first.
Yep, the
get-go. Please me, the one before that as well. Then right up until Rubber Soul, and then the EMI had decided that he was he's a very cool guy. He's a very good musician. He could write scores and stuff. So EMI decided to bump him up from to make him a producer in his own right, because being an engineer was one thing, and in those days EMI didn't give any credits at all. If you look at any records, you won't find any engineering credits at all. So all that stuff that Norman did was never credited to him in any way. So,
and then he had a big hit.
He had a big hit, yeah.
He had a big hit under the name Hurricane Smith.
Hurricane Smith. He soon after I joined, EMI, in their wisdom, cancelled our contract in 1971. I was very disheartened, really, after SF Sorrow and Parachute. I thought were two, and so that wasn't a great result to have your contract cancelled. But Norman said, listen, I was very involved in all the productions that I was writing there, and he knew that I was capable of producing records because we discussed everything, and so he said, look, I know you're the Pretty Things are looking at other companies to sign with. They ended up with Warner Brothers. But Norman said to me, why don't you, I know you like working in the studio. I know you love the studio, and I do. I always have. I miss being a live, musician too. But he said, come on, I have a word with the people upstairs, and I'm sure, I'll get you a job here producing records. So I said, well, okay. I kind of thought I liked the change of direction. I thought, well, I want to do this. I want to try this. I hated leaving the Pretty Things, but the very next, when Phil landed the contract with with Warner Brothers, and they wanted an album, he came to me and said, will you produce it for us? So that John and I and him continued our harmony singing together. But I couldn't use, because I was signed to EMI for production purposes, I had to use a pseudonym and I called myself Asa Jones. And it sounded to me like a big American guy with a cigar, And,
there you go.
But anyway, that's so if you look on the the funny thing was that Phil said to me when we started the session, he said, "Well, you've got any songs going? What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I've got one." So he said, "Well, we played it," and he said, "Wow, that's great." There's one or two lyrics, that needed sorting out. Then, so he did that. So that became a song that we were going to do on the album. And when you write a song, it suits your voice. So Phil tried to sing it, and it wasn't so good. He said, and John gave it a shot, but Phil said, "Listen, it's your song, man. You got to sing it." So I sang it, and when I gave all the tapes to Warner Brothers at the end of the album, when everything was wrapped up, and they and lo and behold, what would they pick as a single?
Yours, okay.
Over the Moon, yeah. I left. I gave that was for the Pretty Things management to deal with. I didn't get involved in that. But
so with the Pretty Things, you were really involved with the Pretty Things went through a stage where they did a lot of library music, right? Stuff kind of like
we did a lot right from when I first joined the band.
And that kind of became became kind of like the Hot Licks series, right?
Yeah. We called ourselves the Electric Banana, that was the name that was invented for us by this library music company called DeWolf. DeWolf. So we did that. That's, I sang my first, on the first lot of sessions we did, the publisher, DeWolf, said, "Listen, we want you to make an album, but there's a couple of songs we want you to do from some of our writers we've had." Right. So Phil listened to one of the songs, and he said, "Well, there's no thinking way I'm gonna be singing that load of So John and I, there were two songs. So John and I drew straws, and I sang one, he sang the other. But I sang a song called Street Girl, which was it was pretty good. It gave me a lot of confidence to do, because I'd never really sung anything on my own before. I'd been back with all the boys doing the doo-wops.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff got into movies.
Oh yeah. Well, that basically, that's because people want to use, it costs a lot of dough to use like a Rolling Stone track or they want fortunes. So if you get something that sounds a bit like this or a bit like that,
style-wise,
they can they go to companies like DeWolf and they say, "Look, we want something," and they give them something. And they get, so we get paid, they get paid. They don't, and the people who are buying the music don't have to pay, like astronomical sums that they would have to pay.
Right. And, so you wound up with some weird movies as well, but, some of those albums are super, super interesting. There was the Electric Banana, there was more Electric Banana, the Electric Banana Return of the Electric Banana. There's some great stuff there. And, it got into some really, really weird movies, but, the music is incredible. Some great stuff came out of the Electric Banana phase. Going back, I don't think you were involved with the band at this time, but, David Bowie covered, two of your tunes on his Pinups album.
I think that was before I joined.
That was before he did Sorrow and Rosalind, right?
Yeah. Well, he and Phil were really tight buddies.
Yeah. So he did two of those tunes on the Pinups album, and that was pre-Wally. And you produced Barclay James Harvest, right?
Yeah. That was one of the first things I did when I got to EMI. Because Norman had produced the first album, but he was really busy with his solo career was blossoming, and he didn't have a lot of time. He said to me, "Look, Wally, can you do this? I had the time to do this. I can't get into it at the moment. I've all kinds of stuff going on in his career, his solo career." So I said, and I got on very well with the guys, and I sang on a couple of bits and pieces.
Right. You worked on Twink's album, the Think Pink album.
I did, yeah. He said, "Why don't you come by?" He was making something in Decca Studios, and I played a bit of piano on it, I think. I can't remember what exactly it was I did, but
Twink put together the band called the Pink Fairies.
Right. I didn't. Yeah, they used to kind of appear now and again. If we did a gig in London, it was kind of suddenly the stage was full of a lot more people than just the Pretty Things.
But the Pink Fairies kept that Pretty Things sound to it. It was just a continuation. There wasn't a lot of musical difference between those two bands.
They
pretty much, were parallel in style. You worked on Phil May's album, Phil May and the Fallen Angels, which was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that was our album actually. It's a hell of a long story. I mean, how long have you got? But basically, the guy called Mickey Finn started this, and there was all kind of people have been involved, and it never quite happened. And he eventually, because Mickey had this financier who was going to stand, eventually a studio was booked in Geneva. And we spent some time there, and we really got super messed up. But anyway, Phil and I wrote the majority of the material. And it was in the end that when they came to sell the album, they were looking. I think they decided because the Fallen Angels wasn't going to. Maybe people weren't going to buy something called the Fallen Angels, but if you called it Phil May and the Falling Angels, it's a lot more commercial.
Sure. Yep. And you also then you came back to the Pretty Things. You got back into the whole fold and continued on, and so from there. I know a couple of albums came out, Balboa Island, Resurrection. That was when you came back, right? That was when you came back.
We came back before that. We did, we came back together. We had the Dutch fan club because everything kind of disbanded around about 76. I came back from working in France. I've been working in France. I left EMI. It was like working for, the government, the civil service. Right. It didn't suit my persona.
Too corporate.
And I didn't. I'm not a corporate animal at all. I didn't conform to what they wanted. Anyway, so I went to work in France with Philippe Debage, and I spent two idyllic years living mostly in Biarritz in the southwest. I just love. I mean, the part of France I love, and because I lived there and loved it. But then I came back. 76. I decided, this is life is passing me by. I got to get back to reality. So I came back, and at the same time, Phil had kind of, I don't know how to describe it really, altercations he left anyway, so Phil and I started doing bits and pieces together again. But it wasn't until 78, the Dutch fan club, the Pretty Things Dutch fan club, had organised a weekend to come over and for us all to bring our wives and girlfriends and just, and they organised around a gig, but they put us in a hotel and so we had a swell time we had a really nice weekend and played a gig, which was bootleg, and that's how they got their money. And,
that became live. That became the live album, right?
Yeah.
Live 78, and that was an interesting album as well. It was a good album. Yeah.
Okay.
And then after that you did Crosstalk.
Well, that showed the seeds for a real resurrection, a real kind of coming together, a real reunion. And that's when we. It was Phil discussed it with me, and it's the lineup of myself, Jon Povey, Phil May, Skip Allen, Dick Taylor, and Pete Tolson. A lot of people say that that's the 18. They say that's the best lineup we have. So it was a pretty hot band. Yeah, I must admit, it was great to play in.
Yeah, so you guys did a Crosstalk. You did another live album. Then you did Rage Before Beauty.
Yeah. I didn't. I left. There was a lot of problems with when we did a German tour when we're touring Crosstalk and the promoter ran off with all the money. I mean, I just thought, this business is. I kind of walked away from it. This is really. So Phil and Dick. In fact, we all did. But Phil and Dick used to do gigs with pick up some musicians and do gigs, called the Pretty Things or whatever. But in '94. The manager at the time, Mark St. John, said to Phil and Dick, look, the way forward is to get the real guys back in. Not the guys you're using at the moment. Right. We were invited to come back, and there have been some resolution of a lot of legal problems, and it's been a stressful time, but the Pretty Things were finally back in control of their entire catalogue again, from all the Philips Fontana stuff, the early stuff, up into Emotions, and then on to the EMI stuff, the Warner Brothers stuff. But it was all under one roof now, and it was. Okay. It finally ended up in a company called Snapper. But then Mark said the only way to sell this is to have the real band. So that's when we all came back and reformed the real band.
Right. So there was a whole intermediate phase of the Pretty Things. When plays were coming and going, they were just bouncing in and out real quick. And then you guys got it back together again. And so that was, I guess, that was later on. And so the last album you guys worked on together was Resurrection. Was that the last big Pretty Things piece?
No, I don't think so. That was from Abbey Road when we did.
Yeah.
We did SF Sorrow live at Abbey Road in 1998.
Okay.
Yes.
That's when Resurrection came out in 1998 as well.
Yeah. Okay. But there's stuff after that. There's Island is after that, surely.
Okay from a Cloudy Skies was in 2000.
Oh, Bouquet from a Cloudy Skies. Well, that's the big box set with everything, all kinds of stuff in there.
Yep. And there's some new pieces in that as well, right?
Yeah, there was. Well, Phil and I, going back, had made. We had a tape recorder, a Revox, where you could make very basic overdubbing stuff. So we made quite a few demos around about the time of Parachute and Before for the DeBarge album, and these tapes have been known about for a long time, but they've gone missing, and they were the Holy Grail. But then, at the time of when Bouquet from a Cloudy Sky was released, well, just before it, they'd been discovered. So there were these rarities, outtakes and stuff that we did. They were the demos for Parachute, most of them. Which it was, a lot of people appreciated a great deal.
Yeah, and then you were involved in that huge, great live, the 40th anniversary live piece, live in Brighton.
Oh yes. No, that was
an amazing show.
It was a good show. I loved it. It was a tiny little place, but where they drove a mobile studio out to outside this little pub in Brighton, and they recorded the whole thing, and it was filmed as well. So. It was,
great show, great album. Then there was some off pieces. I don't know if you're involved in this, but an album came out called The Pretty Thing Mates with Matthew Fisher. Were you involved in that at all?
No. When was that?
The name of the album is A Whiter Shade of Dirty Water.
Oh, right.
Let's see, it was The Pretty Things Mates. They did some Pretty Things stuff. They did a lot of covers. 96 Tears. They did Whiter Shade of Pale, I believe. They did on that thing. Pushing Too Hard. It was just a conglomeration of 3 or 4 different bands.
I think that was before 94. When I think that wrecked.
Yeah, I don't know. It was kind of like a bootleg piece. I don't know where the heck it even came from, but they did.
I think that's before we got back together. I think it's something that Phil did in the 80s or maybe early 90s. I think it's pre-94 anyway.
Okay, and then David Bowie did a tune to you, tribute to you guys. The Pretty Things Are Going to Hell, right?
Oh yeah,
which was a great tune. In fact, you know what? Let's take a quick break and let's play a little David Bowie. And he loved the Pretty Things. He was just in awe of that band, right?
He was, yeah. He was. I mean, before anybody knew, he was just playing Davy Jones or whatever his name was. He used to hang around.
What to wear, what to say, what to do on a sunny day. Who to phone, who to fight, who to dance with on a Sunday night. Reaching the very edge, reaching the very edge. I'm going to the other side this time.
things are going to hell. Okay. So, what are your plans if and when we're allowed to go out again and start performing again? Do you plan on doing anything? Are you,
I'm getting itchy feet. I haven't been out on the road for years, but I want to do. I'm so bored with not doing it. And if you can still do it, why not? Why don't you do it? I'm really up for it. I'm not. I've got a few ideas. I've sounded out a few musicians.
yeah.
And I feel positive. I've got a load of songs. One of the only good things about lockdown is I've been, what do? You pick up your guitar and you start doing stuff. So, I've got a load of songs that I really like.
What musicians, any musicians you're eyeing to go out with you? Anybody, in particular?
No, I've been talking to a lot of people, but I'm not going to give any names at the moment. But, it's
well, you'll have to come back for part 2 to do that.
yeah, okay, you're right.
I know some great UK guys who are definitely looking to work again.
Yeah.
A lot of them are, probably your alumni, guys like Zoot Money and guys like that. They're out there. They're all looking to get out there and gig again. So,
yeah, I mean, it's been too long.
yeah.
And this lockdown is just sending everybody crazy.
Yeah. And if you go, going out again, are you going to be doing, Pretty Things tunes as well?
Inevitably, I will be doing. Yeah, I will. I mean, you've got to go. A lot of those songs, have a lot to do with me. So it's natural. I should do it. I mean, people will expect me to do stuff like that.
Yes.
And I would do that. But I got some new stuff and some old stuff. Maybe not exclusively things I've written. I don't know. It's kind of, I just feel like I want to be in a good rock band again.
And you corrected me, but, Phil May passed away in May is going to be a year. This May will be a year.
May 15th, yeah.
Yeah, May 15th. And, you guys were, you guys spent a lot of years together playing. So, I'm sure his spirit is there every time you play. And,
well, I will feel there's something on my shoulder. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he lived and breathed, rock and roll, and he really enjoyed. He was a natural frontman,
Yes.
because of I don't know whether I'm anything like the kind of character Phil is as a stage personality. But I feel confident about musically. I think I've got some great songs. Well, let's say some good songs anyway. I'm buzzing on them at the moment, and I've got to decide how to record them, what instruments I need, what personnel I need. We've got Parachute Revisited is being released. I've remixed the whole thing. We did it actually about 10 years ago. I was denied. I've always been denied by management and by the record company. They have never allowed me to remix anything, do anything to any of our old stuff, even though Norman Smith regarded me as his protege, and I did too. And I do have a big kind of feeling about all the stuff we recorded as the Pretty Things. But anyway, I've never been. So about 10 years ago, for the 40th anniversary of Parachute, which was 2010, we recorded. I took Pete Cholson, I took Jon Povey, and myself and Skip Allen, and we had a studio in Malaga for a month, and we kind of looked at the songs from Parachute from anew. We didn't. Nothing was sacrosanct. Nothing was. We could. I mean, some of them ended up quite similar to the original recordings, and others not so. But I think they're all interesting, and I think if anybody liked Parachute, they'll like this. So I've remixed it recently, and it's being released by an American company called Renaissance Records, and that's going to be out. At the moment, it looks like being in October. I'm hoping we can bring it forward a bit, but there has been a huge backlog in the production of vinyls in the US and everywhere because nobody's been working. So
yeah, this COVID thing slowed everything down. It really destroyed the music industry.
Yeah,
no, it really did. So what I'd like to do now is invite you back for part 2. If you're willing, I'd love to have you back here with me. And
okay. Would you like me to invite John as well? Jon Povey?
I would love that. I think that'd be great.
He lives in Malaga, but with this kind of technology, that's not a big problem, is it?
No, we'll do it via Zoom. I'll talk to you offline about that, and maybe we can dive into SF Sorrow and really, really rip that album apart, because that's a classic. And we could talk about that for a bit, and with John, it'd be great. So I just like to thank you for spending today with me, and we're going to get ready for part 2. I'm going to contact you later today. We'll set up a date. And do you want to talk to John, see when he's available, and we'll make this, we'll
I'm pretty sure he'd love to do it. So he's still musically active, and we talk a lot.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is I'm going to close the show out today with The Good Mr. Square. Do you want to tell us about that before I play it?
The Good Mr. Square was when we first started writing Parachute, Phil and I. We sat down and Phil said we didn't even know what we were going to do. We didn't know where we were going with this. It was a new album, the last thing with SF Sorrow didn't get a great reaction, but we weren't thinking, oh wow, how are we going to follow that? It was just, so we sat down and Phil said, well, I don't know, I got this, I've been writing a little story about this guy called The Good Mr. Square. And he said, as he said, the good, something bang, went bing in my, and I rushed next door, got my guitar. And Phil explained to me, The Good Mr. Square is about a guy who he keeps a scrapbook, this is before the digital age. He keeps a scrapbook and he cuts squares out of paper, about all the people he likes to, see, and the people he likes, and he's sticking all these things and cutting, clippings out of magazines and newspapers. And that's, in about 10 minutes we had the song. We had it all done. It was, and it kind of kicked us off, and it gave us a direction for Parachute.
Wow. Yeah. Now, the version I have is from Kitchen Rock. Tell us about Kitchen Rock real quick. And then,
when we all got locked down, everybody's terribly bored, me included. And I decided I got an old iPad, and first I just sat down and played something into this iPad, just a straight thing, and I posted that. People loved it. So the next time I have technology here, and I could separate the sound from the file, from the video file I had, right, and put it into Pro Tools, and then I started adding things, like keyboards, and I got a drum kit here, and I sing a bit, so I can play most things after a fashion. So. Sure. So I did. I ended up doing. I was well supported by everybody. They loved it and they wanted more. In fact, I should. They've asked me to do more, and I keep meaning to do some more now. But one of the things I did, again, I think it was after Phil's passing, just after Phil's passing, I was thinking all the songs we've written and the milestones we passed together. So and this was one of them. The first song of Parachute that gave us a direction. So this is a very rudimentary version, but anyway.
Okay.
It's the Good Mr. Square.
Well, we're going to say goodbye, and we're going to play The Good Mr. Square. And Wally will be back, and maybe we'll get Jon Povey with us as well. And thank you. I want to thank you for this time. And just bear with me 1 second as we play this tune.
The good Mr. Square, he doesn't have any hangups. He spends his time looking through other people's eyes. The good Mr. Square, he doesn't have any hangups. He spends his time looking through other people's eyes. Inside, he likes the things that they done. The good Mr. Square, he doesn't have any hang-ups. He spends his time. And as she
Not Your Mother's Radio is listener funded. If you wish to contribute, our PayPal info is notyourmothersradio@gmail.com. That's notyourmothersradio@gmail.com. We would like to thank you in advance for any contributions. Elliott definitely is not your mother. Elliot's not your mother. He's not mine either. I wouldn't mind it, though.